I'm Dale Lawrence. Welcome to the Travel Show. Thanks for joining us. I'm at the Dusitani Hotel, which later this evening is hosting the grand finals of the Miss Travel Daily Asia competition here in Thailand. I'll be interviewing the finalists and then talking to the lucky winner. I'll also be interviewing the Chief Executive Officer of the Pacific Asia Travel Association in the first of a two-part interview. And of course, we'll be bringing you the latest news from around the region. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Amazing Thailand, just as amazing as you remember.
Well, I'm joined by Alex Willits, the acting general manager of the Dusitani, which of course is hosting the grand final of Miss Travel Daily Asia this evening. Alex, quite an exciting night for you, isn't it?
Yeah, looking forward to it, Dale. It's great to have Travel Daily Asia back with us on Thirsty Thursday. We enjoy hosting these events very much, but to have a slightly different spin on it this evening makes it that little bit more special.
As you say, it's the normal last Thursday in the month travel industry networking occasion with the added spice of the finals of Miss Travel Daily Asia. I think you're going to have a packed house tonight, aren't you?
Yeah, it's always a well-attended event. You know, there's a really great following in Bangkok, but yeah, I think tonight makes it a little bit more special, so I'm sure we'll see it packed to the rafters.
As we waited for the results of the final voting, I spoke to the 5 finalists, starting with Kun Mint. Now, Kun Mint, you haven't been to Russia before, have you, Kun Mint?
No, I haven't.
So are you excited about possibly winning the prize for St. Petersburg?
Yeah, most of everything. It's one of the countries in my dreams.
I heard about Travel Daily a long time, and one of my friends recommended me to join this competition. And I think it's interesting because I can see a lot of people, and I can learn people from competition as well.
I have great experience from many events. It's variety. Of course, it's for travel and media and marketing and advertising. I already passed that, and I love it. It's creative, and then make me alert and have a lot of creativity all the time.
I have visited the Travel Daily Asia fan page, and I feel kind of like, okay, on behalf of I'm working as a sales manager at the Mountain Hotel Bangkok, I feel like it would get more advantage if I join the competition, and if I would be a winner tonight, I would like that people in my business will get to know me better.
Finally, we have Kun Kanya. Now, Kun Kanya, it's been a lot of fun, this Miss Travel Daily Asia, hasn't it? And it's all coming to a conclusion now. So, if you win first prize, and you go to St. Petersburg, what do you want to see most of all there?
I would like to visit at the Hermitage because it's just as the biggest largest art museum in the world, and I would like also visit in the beautiful Paris in the water, and then after that, I want to visit because it have a lot of place to visit there.
And it was indeed Miss Kanya Vinakup who landed the first prize, a trip to the historic city of St. Petersburg. Here's her reaction.
I'm very
really happy, and I never dreamed about I will get this prize, but I have done and do with my best.
Thailand's decision to withdraw from the World Heritage Convention will not impact upon the country's 5 World Heritage Sites. That's according to the head of the Thai delegation, Kunsuit Kunkiti. But it does mean that Thailand is unable to press for the accreditation of new sites. And that's a major setback for those historical attractions, mainly in Thailand's Buriram province, that were in the approval pipeline. Thailand's 5 sites include the Ayutthaya Historical Park. There's some encouraging news for the aviation industry. Figures released by the International Air Transport Association show a 6.8% increase in passenger traffic in May, and that's compared to the same month in 2010. IATA predicts the industry will make some $4 billion profit this year, but there's also a warning from IATA that political unrest in the Middle East and national debt issues in some European countries will pose a threat to future prosperity.
Wow! Look at the size of that bantam. Chickens are the symbol of Lampang, which was once known as Kukuta Nakhon. Legend has it that when Buddha arrived in this city, the god Indra was afraid that the people wouldn't wake up in time to meet him. So, the god transformed himself into a white chicken to awaken the people. You'll notice the symbol of Lampang on signboards throughout the city. Locals also make ceramic bowls decorated with the birds, which sell like hot cakes. The city also boasts other stunning ceramics.
Amazing Thailand, just as amazing as you remember.
The face of international tourism is changing at an unprecedented rate. The growth of no-frills airlines has created new travel opportunities for millions of tourists across the region and indeed around the world. China is predicted to become the world's most important source market for tourists by the year 2015. So how is the industry going to cope with this growth? Join me after the break when I talk to the Chief Executive Officer of the Pacific Asia Travel Association as Bill Calderwood goes on the record. Bill Calderwood, thank you very much for going on the record. Bill, report just out suggests that China by 2015 is going to be the world's #1 international tourism source market. These statistics are quite incredible. 15 years between 1995 and 2010, we saw global tourism figures increase by 73%. But for China, a massive 815%. It's going to change the face of international tourism, isn't it? And are we ready for this Chinese invasion?
Good question. It's changed the face of international tourism already. I think by 2015, the projections are that there will be something like 83 million Chinese traveling outbound every year. And of course, the majority will come to Asia itself, so that's going to be a very big impact on this particular destination. There is no country within the Asian region where the importance of the Chinese market can be overlooked. Thailand in itself, by 2015, would probably expect to receive something like 2.5 million Chinese, almost 10% of all international arrivals. Are we ready? I think there's a lot of hard thinking which many destinations have to do. They have to start thinking about the implication of this. It's wonderful business, but there's going to be impacts on seasonality, dispersal, length of stay, type of accommodation, the type of food, the language services. All of those factors are well and truly going to impact. But the other thing which is very important is that destinations have to think about the impact on the balance of arrivals. And if they become too dependent on any one particular market, e.g. China, they're at risk, obviously, if some event within China itself turns off the tourism flows. So I think there needs to be some good thinking about the numbers which you can attract, but also the segments you can attract from China. You know, we often talk about China as one homogeneous unit. It's not. We never would think about Europe as being one country. It's all different. And we should start thinking about China in the same way, because the Chinese from Guangdong province have got a different style, different expectation, and indeed a different travel experience than, say, their cousins from up north, Shanghai, Beijing. And then as we look at the potential of all what's called the secondary cities traveling in the future, that's going to have a different dynamic. We'll see some very high-end, wealthy Chinese wanting one set of services. We'll see people coming overseas for the first time in a group tour wanting something different. So a lot of questions to be asked, a lot of answers to be found, great potential, but one must manage it very carefully.
Indeed. Several issues arising, really, I think, Bill. Language, for example. Yeah. Now, it's taken for granted in the international hospitality community that staff at pretty much every level must have a reasonable command of the English language as their first or second language. They're going to have to start learning Mandarin fairly quickly, aren't they?
Indeed. Not only learning the language, but also learning the cultural mores and how to deal with the Chinese traveller. And I think that that countries have been through a similar situation in the past where they saw the rise, for example, of a Japanese market. There was a need to understand the type of service levels, the language, the type of food, their expectations. No different with the Chinese. And I think that the issue is, however, that we're talking about a market which will be so much bigger. The Chinese market by 2015 will be like 5 times larger than the Japanese market ever was. So you've got to factor that in. And that in itself is why it's so exciting, and perhaps why it's also so challenging.
And is it why, do you think, major hotel groups are now looking at opening 2-star hotel chains with one eye perhaps, or perhaps both eyes on this expected surge in outbound travel?
It's interesting. I recently spoke at a China summit where there was experts from Australia as well as from China. And a very clear message was that the Chinese traveller, they may be looking for bargains when they're buying their package, but when they hit the ground, they spend big time. And indeed, they are quite significant spenders in any particular market. So they might initially be looking at a standard of accommodation which is 2-star, 3-star, but never be fooled that they're not going to spend money in a lot of other areas, shopping, eating in particular. Oh,
you're quite right. I mean, there have been 1 or 2 very interesting surveys over the past year or so, Bill, which show that Chinese travellers, once they get to their destination, they head straight for the expensive shopping malls, and they want to buy those high-value branded goods.
Well, it's all part of the experience of travelling overseas, being able to come back and brag to your friends, look where I've been and look what I've bought. And it's the brand purchase is a very important element of anyone's holiday experience, but very important, obviously, for the Chinese traveller, a new market which is only in the last 10 years started to venture outbound. And this is part of the trophy, if you like, going back to sort of make a statement about you as an individual.
And the fact that you can afford to make that trip.
Indeed.
Interesting, the UNWTO very recently published some statistics that show that China's moved into third place in the top 10 ranking of international tourism spenders, overtaking the United Kingdom, where we know belts are being tightened.
I think we've got to be careful that we don't lump all travellers into the one category. There will be very wealthy Chinese travellers who will be looking for the top of the line in everything which they do. And there'll be sufficient numbers of those to attract a lot of businesses. So let's not overlook them. I think it's very much a case of we need to try and better understand where the Chinese traveller will come from, what they expect to do, what price points they're looking at. And let me tell you, it will cover the whole waterfront. So there's no reason why the five-star general manager should be fearful of the Chinese. They will be there, they'll be spending big. At the same time, as with any normal segmentation, you have different types of travellers, and some will be looking for a cheaper end. But as I said, they'll be spending money in many other ways.
What about the threat to sustainable tourism, Bill? Do you think there is a worry there, concern?
I think tourism always has to be very conscious of the potential threats to sustainability, to the environment, to the culture. And we've often argued that tourism is a friend of sustainability, and we have to maintain that belief. I think that part of the exercise that destinations and individual operators will have to make is to determine whether they want to go after numbers or whether they want to restrict the numbers in such a way that it doesn't affect adversely the experience. Because in the end, it doesn't matter. If the experience is not there, the Chinese won't come either. So we have to be realistic about protecting the experience, and that's part of the sustainability.
Your mission at PATA, Bill, you and your team, is to promote sustainable tourism to, from and within the Asia-Pacific region. And it's a region that's faced a number of disasters in recent years, man-made and natural. And yet the tourism industry bounces back time after time to such an extent that I think it's almost taken for granted by governments, isn't it? Oh, don't worry about tourism, it'll soon recover. But the more recent problems have changed travel trends, haven't they, with people travelling shorter distances, staying in more affordable accommodation, and certainly picking up on the variety of offers now on the internet through no-frills carriers, for example. So there has been a bit of a sea change there, hasn't there?
There has been a change. I think if you look at the Asian region, it's the fastest growing region in the world. It's the driver of world tourism. It is at present, it will be well into the future. And so any tourism operator who is looking for sustainable growth really has to be an active player within the Asian region. A big factor of it, obviously, is the growing wealth of the Asian populations. But also a big factor is certainly the incidence of the low-cost carriers. They make it possible, whereas before, to some sectors of the market, it wasn't possible. And so the incidence of short breaks, frequent breaks, short haul, it's all been stimulated and driven by the low-cost carrier. And that's here to stay. That's a reality. It's not going away.
Well, we're going to talk much more in next week's programme, Bill, of course, about your challenges as the interim CEO at PATA, about building membership retention and recruitment. But it's probably worth just mentioning that actually the CEO of AirAsia X, Azran Osman Rani, was actually in Beijing for your 60th anniversary conference, wasn't he? So
he was indeed.
I'm betting that you had a quick word with him about perhaps
he was,
the possibility of joining the association.
We were delighted he joined us, and he was actually a very active participant and contributor on one of the panels. And yes, we did have a discussion. And let me say, it's a work in progress. There's some more discussion to be had. But I think, and I feel confident that in time, the AirAsias of this world will understand the value we can bring, and see PATA as a partner in building their business as well.
Okay, but well, as I say, we'll talk more about that next week. Opportunities for growth across the region. Actually, your own office only this week has put out the latest statistics for April, which were encouraging. Year-on-year increase across the region of 5.4%. We've always got to remember, of course, that last year wasn't the best of years, particularly in Southeast Asia. But arrivals to South Asia surged by 24%, and Sri Lanka, Nepal, and the Maldives in particular picking up substantially on last year. And that seems to be the European and the North American markets rebounding to some extent after the impact of the global economic downturn. Is that your take on it?
Yes, it would be nice to have 1 year which you don't see any disaster and you can compare it reasonably with the previous year. There are upsides and downsides comparing year to year. The global financial crisis certainly had a major impact on European and North American travel. We are seeing the North American market coming back. We're seeing some of the European destinations coming back. The only market which is still a bit soft would be the UK. And you can see that in the numbers to many countries across the region. And even if you look at this year in comparison to last year, we've had the impact of the earthquake in Japan. But despite that, we've still seen growth right through the whole region. And so you've got to try and discount what happened last year, etc. But it goes back to a point you made earlier. The tourism industry is extremely resilient. Travel is as an inherent part and a desire of the modern consumer. And nowadays they have more opportunity to travel more cost effectively to more destinations, and that is very much part of their lifestyle. And as I said, Asia is the fastest growing tourism market in the world. A lot of it being driven by inter-regional travel. So there's a lot of positive factors there. And from time to time we're going to have these man-made or natural disasters. We can't change that. What determines our success is how we react to that and how quickly we can overcome those adversities.
And I guess the national tourism boards and the private sector as well have had to react to the fact that the Japanese market, to all intents and purposes, is probably gone for this year, isn't it? I mean, so many people who would have travelled out of Japan are not going to. I'm listening to some of the others today saying, well, I could travel, but I feel guilty about it because of what's happened at home. Maybe it's something in their psyche that sort of says, I better just stay at home this year.
Yeah, that is a factor. But the figures, the outbound figures from Japan, are not as depressed as everyone was predicting. The outbound figures for April and May have been running around about 12–13% below the previous year. That is significantly better than everyone expected.
Yes.
The issue for Japan is not outbound, it's inbound.
Yeah.
And why that's an issue, I guess, is that airlines obviously want to have good two-way traffic. And if somehow we cannot stimulate inbound back to Japan very quickly, it obviously will potentially, in the end, threaten the aviation capacity, which will then rebound in other countries in the region.
It's kind of a vicious circle, actually, isn't it? I mean,
it is. It is, and it helps to reinforce the reality of two-way tourism and how each country is vitally linked. We've established a rapid recovery task force designed very simply to try and look at ways in which we can help a destination like Japan recover much quicker after a disaster of that type. Why? Because it's so significant to the rest of the region, and their success is the region's success and vice versa.
Indeed. Bill Calder, we'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. Stay tuned, we'll be right back after this short break.
Pulanga National Park in Payao is considered to have the most beautiful mist in the country. This breathtaking vista can be seen from the morning until midday with varying degrees of fog. While at Pulanka, why not enjoy a walk through beautiful flowers and trees and visit the million-year-old stone ground? The moss on the stones and rare orchids growing naturally is a sight not to miss. This is certainly a magical place.
Bill, just before the break, you were telling us about this new rapid recovery force with Japan specifically in mind. Just explain how that works.
Very simple. PADA over the years has had a history of pulling together a panel of experts to help member destinations address a particular issue. I think something like in excess of 50 task force have been assembled around the world. And during the conference in Beijing, we issued what we call the Beijing Declaration, which identified the issues which impact on destinations when there's a disaster. There's the immediate effect, but the real problem is a longer term effect, the residual damage to a destination's reputation and perception of safe to travel to. And therefore we've established this task force with 6 individuals from around the region. From Thailand, Singapore, Hong Kong, Australia, Japan, to work on this particular issue and to come up with a series of principles and concepts which can be used not just by Japan but with other countries as well.
So it's a brains trust, is it, of industry experts?
It's a brains trust of industry experts with a very specific terms of reference, charged with coming up with solutions to this particular problem, which we can then share with our membership right around the world so they can actually, hopefully overcome this type of problem.
We talked before about the changing face of travel and tourism across the region, Bill. And you get buzz phrases now that just weren't around when PATA was formed 60 years ago. Eco-tourism, sustainable tourism. But they're echoing loudly now, aren't they, across the region? And I'm just wondering, where are the likely hotspots in the PATA region, hotspots for tourism over the next 10 years? And are they going to be influenced by this constant demand for more sustainability?
They will be influenced by a lot of factors, which sustainability will be one. To me, it's not so much about identifying which particular destinations will be hot. It's about identifying which particular segments of the consumer will be hot. And then for the destinations to make sure that they can actually match their experience with what they're looking for.
You mean such as a surge in adventure travel and maybe beach holidays just sort of easing a little bit?
Yeah, I've done a lot of work in recent years to talk about the non-leisure traveller. The leisure traveller has been the one who's built up the tourism business over many years and still will be important. But increasingly, tourism bodies and destinations and operators have to start to recognise that there's a whole series of other travellers out there who are coming for different reasons. They have different motivations, but when they do come, they're using the same infrastructure, the same resources. What you have to do, obviously, is recognise them, have a look at their hot buttons, and make sure your destination can deliver. So it could be adventure, it could be volunteerism, it could be medical tourism, it could be the empty nesters, long stay, it could be sports tourism. There's a whole raft of different reasons. And each of them in themselves are significant segments, and very importantly, each of them in themselves have the chance to actually boost the yield.
Bill Calderwood, thank you very much for going on the record.
Thank you, Dylan.
Thank you.
Amazing Thailand always amazes you.
Well, that's it for this week's show. My very grateful thanks to Bill Calderwood from PATA, and also to Alex Willits, the Acting General Manager of the Dusitani Hotel here in Bangkok. We'll be hearing more from Bill Calderwood next week, but until then, from everyone on the Travel Show team, it's goodbye